Aliens visiting our planet Earth has been questioned and discussed for decades. Out of the billions of planets, stars, and undiscovered parts of space, we have to be quite reasonable to believe life exists elsewhere. Many events has happened during the last 70 years surrounding the topic of alien abduction. What once was a televised, fictional event has happened to people in real life, or has it really happened? Why would they be visiting our planet? What do they really look like? Where are they from? And are they here to cause harm to our mankind? Today, we'll be going over 3 alleged alien abductions that make us a bit more curious about extraterrestrials visiting our planet. It was Thursday night, October 4th, 2001, a night I would never forget. I was meeting up with my business partner Keith and his wife Amy at our developing business property, a winery called Whispering Winds. After discussing our plans for the business, we decided to relax and drink some wine. Amy jumped on the couch. She wasn't really much of a drinker. She started watching TV since her favorite show was on. Keith and I started to get tired and we both went to bed. Thankfully we had different rooms we could knock out in if both of us decided to stay in late. Of course we wouldn't sleep in the same room since Keith was married. Keith tried to invite his wife to bed with him, but she would tell him she wanted to stay up and watch TV. She then told him she would be in bed as soon as her show was over. I tried to fall asleep, but the bed was so uncomfortable. What were we thinking when we bought these mattresses at the yard sale? Not to mention, Amy had the TV blasting. I screamed telling her to turn it down. Thankfully she did. I finally fell asleep. I remember waking up at around 11 p.m. and saw a weird light shining under my door. Something I've never seen before. I thought to myself, Amy couldn't still be awake at this time, and I sure as hell didn't hear the TV on. I heard a weird sound, like a humming sound. I thought I was still dreaming. When I opened the door, I wish I was. I saw a bright beam of light going right through the window, ending at the couch. I figured maybe some street light outside was just extra bright, but it couldn't be this bright. I also didn't remember a street light being right by our window. I faintly saw Amy's body in the light being levitated and carried through the window. I was in shock. I saw the wine glass I left on a coffee table being levitated alongside Amy. I was too scared to grab Amy as I figured I would go along with her. I glanced outside through another window in the room and saw the beam of light coming from a dish-shaped object. I thought my mind was fucking with me. Maybe I drank too much wine. Maybe I'm still dreaming. I fainted in shock as the light beaming through the window disappeared. I couldn't believe what the fuck I just saw. It all happened so fast. As I recovered consciousness, I screamed loud as I could, and I still couldn't believe what I saw. I heard footsteps coming from Keith's room. My screams only got louder as I figured I was the next victim. Thank God it was Keith. Whew. I was so scared. I couldn't even utter what happened when he looked crazed and anxious to hear what I was screaming. Keith ran to the bathroom to tell Amy to come out, only to open the door with no one there. I didn't even have to ask if Amy was in the room. All I could mutter was, "They took Amy." Keith would scream, "Who?" And all I could say was a huge craft, possibly aliens. Keith wouldn't believe me at all and screamed I was a fucking liar and I was bullshitting him. He ran to the room to grab his cell phone and called Amy. I heard her ring on the couch only to find her phone tucked between the cushions. Keith had lost it once this happened. I just then noticed that the window had defects that seemed rather suspicious. Keith then ran outside to look for Amy. I insisted we called the cops. Once we called the cops, they didn't really take us seriously when we told them what happened. They said they had cops on the way, but since they were short-handed, they weren't sure how long it would take. After about an hour and a half, 2 cops had showed up on our doorstep. By this time, I was sure Amy was dead meat. The cops had thought we were joking until I told them to look at the window. Right as they looked at the window, I noticed the flower bush also suffered some damage. As they seemed dumbfounded, I could tell that they didn't really know how to handle the situation. I could see them outside taking notes by the vehicle. Out of nowhere, the phone began to ring. Keith stared at me and then answered the phone. The call came from a lady who claimed to have found Amy at a gas station. I was so relieved to have heard Amy was found. What made me feel real uneasy was what the lady said next. She claimed that Amy was real dehydrated, distressed, and was way in another town called Mackay. She told us that they would take Amy to the hospital. Amy was asked for a sworn statement by the police regarding what happened that night. She said this: "I couldn't remember anything that happened between me being on the couch falling asleep and waking up on a spaceship. I figured I was still dreaming, but I guess it was all real. I still feel like I'm dreaming right now. I remember waking up in a rectangular room with illuminated light ceilings, something out of a Star Trek film. A strange guy in a full bodysuit had walked in. I would say he was about 6 feet tall. He seemed to have a mask covering his face, with holes in his eyes, nose, and a mouth. Although I was scared as hell, he had a calm presence. Usually I would be screaming in agony, but he assured me I would be alright, and I would be taken to a place not too far from where I came from. For some weird-ass reason, they couldn't take me right back to the couch. I'm sure I may have been there for a longer time. Who knows what they could have done to me. I remember waking up on the ground with trees all around. Thank God I wasn't too far from a petrol station. As I entered the station, the staff looked at me as if I was going to rob them. But it was obvious I was just disoriented, and I seemed pretty lost. I was still confused and didn't know where I was and why I was there. I couldn't even recall drinking wine or anything, so I couldn't have been drunk. Two ladies had offered to help me out by taking me to the hospital, which led me here. Amy had a physical examination following her statements. At the exam, doctors will find a triangular arrangement of marks on her inner right thigh, marks on each heel, and hair growth that seemed odd for the short time she was away. Still to this day, this case remains open, and I'm scared to even have my door open to my bedroom at night, yet alone having any windows unlocked. I love observing the sky. I guess that comes with being a sergeant in the Air Force. However, my stargazing habits has pretty much came to a halt after this night. It was August 13th, 1975, around 1 a.m. I was observing a meteor shower. However, one thing in the sky seemed pretty odd. I saw a couple of bright lights, and there was one bright light that just got bigger and bigger over time. I wasn't sure if this was a plane, but as the lights got bigger, I'm sure it wasn't. The object got closer. I was sure it was no plane I had ever seen before. The object was shaped like a disc and had descended towards the ground about 300 feet away. I could hear the object coming closer and closer as the pitch humming sound became louder. I was scared as shit when this happened. I ran to my car while trying to get the keys out of my pocket. My hands were sweating and my jeans were so tight it was almost impossible to get the keys out in time. I tried to jam the key into the car door. Thank God it opened quick. But when I tried to jam the key into the ignition, I kept missing. I couldn't even get my eyes off the object that was coming closer. I finally got the key in the ignition. The car wouldn't even start. I didn't know what was going on. My car has never had problems like this. It always started with no problems at all. I screamed at myself as if I left the car lights on and the battery may have died. The object got closer and I almost peed my pants. I glanced at the object and I could see a rectangular window on the craft with human-like shadows. I couldn't hear the humming noise anymore at this point. I still tried to start my car, jerking the key around, only to hear the stupid engine not start. I gave up as I felt a sense of numbness going throughout my body. I closed my eyes as I knew my life was over. Out of nowhere, I couldn't even feel the numbness anymore. I didn't even really have to use the bathroom anymore as well. Nothing could explain the fear I felt that event. I saw the object flying away in the sky and disappearing. I figured I would try to start the car ignition for the hell of it, even though it hasn't started the last 5 times. Vroom! I heard the car start without no problems. I drove home immediately with no intentions of stopping anywhere, as I was scared my car would stall. I didn't even want to stop at stop signs. I could have sworn I was driving about 90 miles per hour going home. By the time I got home, it was about 3 a.m. How the hell could 2 hours have passed that quick? I couldn't even recall much more than 15 minutes after looking at the time back in the road. I also didn't live too far from where I was doing my stargazing, so it could not have been the time I drove home. The next morning I woke up, my lower back had a pain I never ever felt before, even a rash I couldn't even recall that could have resulted from anything. I didn't think it was a bug bite, since I didn't see any bites or holes, or any weird bumps. I still wonder what the hell could have happened in those 2 hours. Could I have gone through some time warp? My friend recommended I see a physician. One recommended I should practice self-hypnosis to recollect what happened in those events. After the next few weeks, I felt as if the memories started to come piece by piece as I began to write them on a notepad. I finally felt I could piece the whole experience together after those weeks. According to my memories, I was approached by 2 alien beings, both about 6 feet tall, with skin-tight black clothing. I could tell their intentions were to take me away. They got closer and closer to my car, and I threatened them as I faded to black. I couldn't remember how they got me on the craft, but I remember waking up next to another alien who appeared to be the alien leader. He was much shorter than the other aliens and wore a silver suit. He seemed authoritative over the other ones that took me away. I was still unable to move. The alien leader had faced me, and I still don't know how I could understand him. But he had asked me, it was almost as if he was speaking in my head, but he had asked me if I was going to behave peacefully. I agreed to do so, and my paralysis was taken away. I began to look at the aliens to discover their characteristics, and noticed they had hairless heads, protruding brows, very thin lips, and whitish-grayish skin. I felt so grateful to be able to move. The alien leader had showed me around the ship and told me we were about 400 miles away from Earth. I still can't remember if that's the right number. However, the alien leader, had told me that they would not have contact with Earthmen for another 20 years, but would still stay in contact with me. I felt as if I was the chosen one. I met with Charles McQuiston, co-inventor of the psychological stress evaluator, who had told me that he believes my story regarding these events. I'm still hoping these memories are actually real, not some shit pieced together from a sci-fi film. I remember these images way too vividly to be off some TV screen. Some people believe me, some people don't. Do you? It's been a very long time since I told this story. Well, here it goes. It was back in September 1961. Me and my wife Betty were heading home from our vacation in Canada. We were driving down US Route 3 in New Hampshire around 10 p.m., only 3 miles south of Lancaster. It was just a calm night, nothing crazy, just calm. I couldn't help but gaze at the beautiful sky as I drove down the highway. Usually it was hard to notice all the stars with the city lights beaming. After driving some miles down the road, I noticed something rather odd. I noticed a light in the sky moving irregularly. The way it moved, it couldn't be an airplane. It just couldn't be. Betty was in and out of sleep by the time I started noticing this. I woke her up and pointed at the weird light. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, and neither could Betty. We thought the object could have been some weird balloon in the sky shifting directions, but how could it be so damn bright? I wanted to stop the car, but I felt like we need to get home, and if I stopped, I'd probably fall asleep on a wheel or something. As we drove, the light became bigger and bigger. Sometimes it would appear and reappear, but we were sure it was the trees in the dark making it go away. I almost crashed as the road curved because I couldn't take my eyes off the object. I pulled over and decided to take a better look with my binoculars. Staring through the binoculars, I seen a multicolored light and rows of windows on the object. The object got even closer, and man, it's hard to even recall this. But as I figured, give me a second. The object got even closer as I focused better on it. So close I could see the occupants inside of it. I got frightened and jumped back in my car. I didn't want to tell Betty what I saw because I know she would go ballistic. I sped off as fast as I could, driving away from the object. I was sure Betty could see while I was speeding by this time. I was so scared I couldn't even remember what I saw to her. She knew it was no airplane. The object had disappeared as I drove further. I was glad that we got away from it, or at least remembered at the time that we did. We had passed a road sign I knew I was nowhere close to. I looked at the car timer and 2 hours had already passed. I was so damn scared from the experience we had, I was sure my track of time was all messed up. Both of our watches were broken. I can't even remember how they could have broken, especially considering the fact that we never even left the car. Finally arrived home, and when I looked down at my shoe while getting out the car, my shoes looked as if they went through hell. My wife was terrified and couldn't help but call her sister to explain what happened to us. I couldn't even sleep that night as Betty kept me up with her long conversation and all the terrible nightmares I kept repeatedly having. Betty's sister had insisted that we talk to the Air Force Base. We got in touch with Major Paul W. Henderson, who also confirmed that they had a UFO on their radar that night. I was hoping he would have told us it was a military plane, but why would a military plane stalk a couple coming from Canada? Following this call, the nightmares couldn't stop. Me and Betty both had nightmares of being taken against our will, and they were almost always similar. How the hell were we having the same nightmares after seeing that weird object that night? Not to mention, my stomach ulcers have gotten incredibly worse since that night. Eventually, we met up with Dr. Benjamin Simon, who recommended regressive hypnosis. At this time, I was fed up with the memories and the pain since that night. I felt like there were no cure to this type of experience. Over the next 6 months, we had recalled almost everything that happened. Well, we hope it was everything. I remember our car stalling with the object landing right in front of our vehicle on the road. 6 beings would come out the craft. I can't remember how they even got out, but I just remember 6. They began telepathically telling us not to fear them. It was like they were talking in our heads. Next thing I remember were them taking us into the craft. I remember them being bald, around 5 feet tall, gray, pear-shaped heads with cat-like eyes. As we entered the craft, my wife was taken into a separate room. They led me to another one. They began doing medical experiments as they took samples of my skin, hair, nails, and my sperm. I don't want to recall the exact details of everything. I'm not even sure why I wasn't even freaking out or trying to run out of the place. It was like I could see but not feel what they did, and I couldn't really react anyways. I, however, remember the aliens being very surprised I had dentures. Betty's experiences were almost identical to mine, except she had different tests such as pregnancy tests, where they would place some type of object on her stomach. May have been a needle. I can't really recall too much. I remember she told me that she asked them where they were from, and they pointed to a map full of stars as if she knew how to read it or where it was. Our case would become the first abduction story to be widely publicized and possibly the most legitimate claim. We didn't decide to come out with the truth until many fake stories of our experience started surfacing. We're not the type to publicize things, and we sure as hell didn't really want that much attention. We also didn't want to look crazy or look like we were just making up things. Till this day, I never liked driving at night. I'm always scared that the same thing will happen again. Thank God it hasn't, but I always see the same light in the sky. The same light that just gets bigger and bigger. Except, I don't see any time passing on my end. I hope you're not going to be around when this thing comes back. Thanks for watching my 3 alleged alien abduction stories. Do you believe in aliens? Have you had any experiences? Let me know in the comment box below. Please like, comment, subscribe, and be on the lookout for the next bright video coming your way.